ninja wear black. It's just a simple feature. It explains the character and what you're about to perceive, as most of us get to experience ninja through media. The books may draw a few pictures, but they leave words to describe what's going on. It's a perceived explanation of a shadow. Many believe it was that ability of the kabuki. The kabuki theater had the backstage workers dressed from head to toe in black, as you weren't supposed to see them. They were interacting and moving the play around, giving you the illusion. But still an accurate statement. Ninja wear black. Throughout pop culture, the representation of all black tells us of that character, usually tells us of their goals as well. When we break down this garment for a moment and look at all of the individual pieces, you do find that the ninja garb, regardless of what color it is, has some very standard features to it. It's blue. There's the argument that can be made that it's easier to get lost in the background in blue than it is black. I get the logical, rational, scientific evidence that a dark, natural blue will blend in more to a natural background than a bright black. This is worn. I get that. But in all cases, if I'm just standing here in the middle of a field, in the middle of the night, that's weird. The eye's gonna pick it up. If you're crawling on the ground along a sight line, which already has natural shadows, no, it's not gonna matter. So no, ninjas didn't wear black, ninjas didn't wear blue, they didn't even wear red. They wore all of it, they wore some of it. They would have mixed it up. The most important thing to take from that is, as we're not looking at how media wants to portray them to give us the idea of what we're looking at and what we can expect from the story, we're looking at a group of people that don't want to be recognized, do not want to be seen, and don't really want to be engaged with. So any clothing that makes you stand out is going to get you caught, is going to get people interested in you. So, with that stated, all that we've looked at now talks about and looks upon what peasants would have worn in a time period of the Sengoku Jidai, roughly spoken. For a ninja operative, a shinobi, to go out into the world to perform some sort of espionage, some sort of spy operatives, they would have used much disguise, much like our modern day operatives use. That they're not going in full black clad, they're going in looking like everyone else out there. They're dressed as a samurai, they're dressed as a merchant, they're dressed as a priest, they're dressed as a peasant trying to be peasant work. It all depends on what job they're fulfilling, and that disguise will have to fit for each one of those roles. So if you are a samurai, you know all of the doctrine that goes with it. Most importantly, I think at this moment, when the samurai were being impersonated, you've got to act like that one. You're walking right down the center of the street, which has got to be a real change for someone that's used to be a peasant, and you walk to one side just in case a samurai wants to come, or ghosts are moving through. You want to have that respect. So it's that changeover. It is that mindset. It is that change of understanding. I'll go to, again, modern, but we also have that in the densho, that if I were to disguise, I'm definitely not wearing this, but I'm going to add a limp and I'm going to change my posture so I don't look the same. I'm not recognizable upon who I am, who I was. So let's look at let's look at what makes up peasant garb. So what would have been the most likely peasant garb? Well, the records that we have haven't changed a lot. It's very similar to what a kimono would have been. Though, the main difference, it's not as long as a kimono. Kimono takes a lot more fabric. Another thing to mention here, that Japanese looms of this time period did not create fabric larger ever than 20 inches. So you see a lot of seams coming through. to make up those differences. Another thing I want to mention, as I'm putting it on this stick just to show that the clothing period of that time didn't have curvature, or very rarely had curvature. You'll see it in the collar here, of course. But we've got a lot of rectangles going together. This front piece should just fold over and cover itself. And then with the ties, you change on how large or small you are. So it's based on very simple math to get that to fit. Regular kind of peasant garb, which you could also kind of understand is just like an under kimono, what you would have worn underneath a hakama, or even worn underneath your own uniform when you're starting to build up layers. Now that's true, placing it on a stick, is true when it comes to the tops and the kimono. When it comes to the pants, not so much. Okay, when they're new, they're usually just one color, but these are a few years old now. The drawstring waists, not so much. For the most part, I'll show you what these pants are. That would have been more common, but I would have to imagine, or I do imagine at least, that drawstrings happen every once in a while. There's a large gusset placed into the pants, so you have lots of motion of movement, but more based for farming. And then when it came down to the ankles, either it was just gathered, pleated, and then one simple layer to go around the ankle, and the ankles either were like these, tapered for the ankle, or larger and had strings to wrap around and bind together. Almost tube-like, but there's also, how do you word that? Here we go. We do see there is some curvature to these designs. Standard kind of underneath work pant, light duty. But when it comes to, to go back to what a peasant garb would have been to describe something different, well, that's what I'm going to do. The opening, oh, here we go. There's an opening. You can see my kimono through this because these are cut like a hakama is. A peasant garb would have most likely had that much closer, still an opening to tie it up, but much closer together. And then it depends again, how big you are and how much you want to show or not show. So in essence, these are a peasant pants. And I say that in essence because there's just a few changes which I have to point out. Instead of using ties, I use Velcro. I guess it's space age, but it works. Still pleated and double reinforced knees. I can't see why they wouldn't have had that in the past as well, though there's no pockets on this. I'll get to that in a moment. And the backs are done like hakama. That I wanted that peasant feel. Okay, personal, parentheses. I wanted them to have that kind of samurai feel, but still be peasant garb. So the front and the back are designed kind of like a hakama. Hakama are specifically samurai wear, but within the practice of ninjutsu in the history and study, many come from samurai lineage. So I say that, so I have to show a set of hakama. Hakama, okay, we talked about that opening just a moment ago. This one is an extra large. The old courts would have had much larger. Some of them would have gone almost as far as the ankle to show off their kimono. The big thing for hakama is your number of pleats. You have 7 in total to go across this unit. Some think of it and look at it kind of like a skirt, which I understand, but they are individual legs. And it's because of the pleats that make it look kind of like a skirt. For samurai, or if you were impersonating a samurai, you would be well versed in wearing, maintaining, and sitting. Talked earlier of that practice. I can use myself for this example. I train very rarely in hakama, and when I do, you can totally see it when I'm doing EI. When I sit down, I do not have the elegance that the others do. They go, and they pop the pleats out of the way to sit comfortably so you can get back up nice and controlled. Those little practices that totally give you away. The vest. Okay, this is kind of a rip-off. Yeah, we're gonna say this is a rip-off. This is a rip-off. I've got this written down. Kataginu. Kataginu, if I'm saying that correctly, should translate roughly to bat wings. And that's what the samurai wore over their, sometimes even over their armor. But when in kimono, they'd have that vest that came out and you'd have 3 or 4 pleats coming up to this side. The fronts were tucked into the belt. There's nothing opening here. And then the back is just one plume, much like this one is, up to the shoulders to create quite an interesting effect. That, again, samurai. If you were going and had your, I can no longer speak. If your additional identity was a samurai, you would have had the kataginu. I gotta study my language more. So when I say this is a rip-off one, this is a rip-off one because this is technically a merchant's vest. But I liked it because it kind of gave that illusion of the true bat wings while not being it. I wasn't stepping on any toes because I don't have any samurai background. The vest. Again, rectangles and straight down. Making a mess. Face coverings. Scarf, piece of cloth to cover, muffle. Modern, we have the same thing, does the same idea. That this is, 1, keeps our profile lower. 2, it acts as a filtration device. That if you need to go through a dusty environment, these are super helpful to have. Pouches. I don't have a pouch on me. There it is. Pouches is part of every kit that you'd have either wooden pouches, leather pouches, bagged pouches. Some of them would have been smaller, larger. Types like this would have had netsuke, if I'm saying that correctly. Little wooden charms, and they'd be tucked under and through the belt. And as you walk around, it can't be pulled away. And then just other regular or more simple pockets that would have gone through belt loops just to hold either your kit, food, you name it. Part of the daily wear. The obi. The belt. It can come in different lengths. It can come in different widths. And it's usually brocade? I don't think that's the right word. But it's come off of a loom. It's done with heavy material, or it's quite strong. And this would be worn over your kimono, holding that in place. So when you drop your pants, you still remain fully covered, as just wearing the kimono is perfectly fine. Just wearing, there's still stuff underneath it. The leggings. This is definitely more modern. To go, quote, back in the day, ties would have been used or armor guards. And this really is just, in essence, just the underpiece to what would have been a shin guard or shin armor. This is a modern one, Velcro. The hood. Best case scenario, you can completely cover your face with it to remain in disguise. That, I don't know, would you call that a ruffle? I'm not great with words. But that would be tucked in so your neck is not exposed, and a large enough opening that when you are or have donned it, you can pull it over your face and wear it, in essence, just kind of like its own little scarf. Simple hood. Teiko. I think of that as claws, but to keep you warm, I like these for working. There's that added heat because the wrist doesn't get any exposure. There's a little ring to go around. I do my middle finger, but I'm sure you can do whatever finger you want. Historically, there would be ties that would go on here. Again, Velcro for quick use. And then over top, warmth. In many cases, these jackets are not full length and you just be layering. Layering? No, I don't even know if I can speak English. So adding warmth, protection, and as we can see here, again, much like the shin guards were, the forearm protectors. It's just that beginning of when you would then occupy that with armor. I guess an ode to Shaolin, that as if you could have taken on a samurai character, you would equally could have taken on a monk character. And these simple bands are what would have taken place of the shin guards, which of course have disappeared. The idea is that you would have had all bunched up material, and with the use of this band, you would wrap to keep this all in place so you could go about your training. And if you were a practicing monk, depending on what lineage you chose, you'd be using tools like that. And what modern ninja wouldn't recognize the wrist wraps? Again, I'm taking this as a warmth factor, as these were, because these technically aren't part of ninja kit, at least not on this video. You see this throughout manga, you see it through pop culture, but I wear these because they keep me warm. They're just meant to be warm. I like being warm. I'm missing something. We've talked about everything, but if we're talking about ninja kit, ninja clothing, we've gone mask, we've gone hood, we've got, did I really talk about the kimono at all? No, I talked about the other jacket. First, I have to state, as everything happens to be a first, that kimono is kind of a misnomer, that's just like clothes stuffs. But we all kind of understand culturally that this is a kimono. Now again, peasant wear, but it's one step further than what we saw in what I consider the most peasant wear. We've got still the shoulder protection. This is the yoko. Yokote? No, I think it's an English word, but that's not the point of this conversation anyways. We've got the tie-offs, and we've got the full arms that have come through. And throughout, we see that there's seams, as that original loom would have only gone, 14 to 20 inches or 16 to 20 inches. So to get that same look, you follow those rules. You add a bunch of seams to the front and to the back. And then just a side note about the mon, the family crest. In most cases, those are geometric. I think this is a really fun fact that when it's being put on traditionally, it's hand painted. Hand painted. I think that's awesome. This is screen printed on a completely different piece, so I could mess up multiple of them before I mounted that on. But to do that properly, it's hand painted. I should get off that topic. Now, a variation of pants that we can see that come from samurai class, and that is a hakama type front. So it's much like these type of pants, but the front is fully pleated, the 7 full pleats, front and back. But when it gets to the ankle now, it's just like the pants I showed you earlier, which I should show you again because that just makes sense. Where it comes down to that ankle, and it was considered, like these are translate directly to field pants. Those don't directly translate to field pants, but they were meant to be worn under armor to wear into the battlefield, as that would be just far too much material to be bound at the ankle. So they look fabulous under armor with all those pleats. And now that all of this is unfolded and I need to go to folding it all, this has been my explanation of ninja garb. Yeah, they wore black and blue and red and whatever any color they wanted. It was just their choice. Just don't get caught. Okay, I'm getting back to work. Happily, I remembered the most important of all ninja kit, the tabi. I'm so sorry. The tabi. Technically, it's a farming tool. Farmers today still wear this. Flat-soled. It's the most important part I want to remind everyone upon tabi. It's flat sole. There's no padding, there's no gripping, there's gripping. There's no support in a tabi. And the toe is split. So you can put on geta, clogs, you name it, as long as it's thong appropriate for your foot. Modern science, though, has also shown that toe, having that ability to be pointed forward and properly aligned, is really great for your posture. Just an interesting side benefit. Tabi, Jiga tabi, I don't know if that was so much of a thing, though definitely tabi were worn outside. Most of the time you would have the warja, I'm not saying that correct, the sandal. Sometimes they were straw, sometimes they were jute. The most interesting is how they go together. These little teeth. These little teeth are small bits of aluminum I've made. They're rounded and they're just very thin. And on the other side is just, oh, that's gonna be hard to see, chain loops. You might just have to believe me. There they are. Geez, I can't even see them. And those little chain loops, I'm not to be able to see them, but I can show you. You grab hold. I wasn't showing you the chain loops. You couldn't see them because I wasn't showing you. There they are. And with that little chain loop, this just goes on to the other side and sinks in place. So that's the other side. And because you are wearing them, they sit flat to your feet. So they're nice and comfortable. And because you have to take the time to sew that string in place, which is not easy, nor is finding the direct and correct portion for your body. But with that stated, once you have taken the time to design these for your feet, not only do they go on really comfortably, they feel like you're not even wearing them. There's something about form-fitting clothing, clothing that you make for yourself. Yeah, that works. The tabi. You could also just add multiple lines to make that easier to fit. And now I can confidently say I've covered all of the basic ninja kit. No, I can't confidently even say that, because with what I explained within this video is that basic ninja kit would have been just at home for when they're just chilling, for when they're doing their things, for when they have to exit and go into the world. They would have picked 4 different categories to choose from. That'll have to be videos for another day. Okay, now I'm getting back to work. And as this is a practice of martial arts, the uniform itself is a tool of the martial arts, needs to be considered and kept as a tool. So just throwing it around just seems kind of inappropriate. At least for the point of storage. Every Ruha seems to have their own system of folding their training uniform. This is my system. Just a way to be able to carry all the kit in one place and keep it organized. Sengoku Jidai, no one was hanging their clothes at that point. Everything was kept folded. Crisp, clean lines. Here we go. One uniform ready for storage. And just to add to it, that every ruha would have a very specific knot and style of tying this. This adds to the fun.